It was our son's first day in secondary school. It's a time that changes everything. A time of joy, of fear, of discovery, and that's only the parents. We left home, walked down the road to Stony Batter, hopped on a bus, headed up the old Cabra Road and got off. We walked up to the crossroads, and my heart sank. The kind of junction that lay ahead of us was like something from an industrial landscape. It's designed for cars, not for people. Pedestrians are there on sufferance. They're held back behind these kind of cattle crush barriers. They're clearly not at the top of the transport spectrum. This is an overhead view of the crossroads that my son had to cross. And looking at it from above, it looks fairly well organized. But if you drill down into it, you discover that actually, for the car to get across this junction, it's just one stop at one set of lights. But for the pedestrian, they have to stop 4 times, and each time they have to push a button and wait for the lights to change. So while the vehicle or the car just shoots through, it can take a pedestrian 2, 3, 4, or 5 minutes to get through. And I don't think it's fair that the pedestrian is the second-class person in all of this. And I think we've got to do something about it, because with these kind of layouts of our cities and suburbs, we're creating environments that makes it very difficult for people of all ages to walk. And in fact, what we're doing is we're creating obesogenic environments. And if we look at what some of the organizations out there are saying, they're saying this is wrong. The Irish Heart Foundation is saying we've got to do something about this. They're saying that overweight and obesity is now the most common childhood disorder in Europe. In Ireland, 1 in 10 kids are overweight and another 1 in 10 is obese, so 20% there is a problem. 22% of 5 to 12-year-olds are overweight or obese. Clearly, we've got to do something about it. And also, if we look at what's happening in terms of the way we use the outside space, in terms of how children are discovering the world outside, we've got to look at what's happening in terms of accident figures. The Irish Heart Foundation says, look, we've got to get people walking, particularly at a younger age, get them discovering their own way in the world. And the news out there isn't great. You can see that while the overall accident rates for Irish roads have improved a lot in recent years, for children, we're not doing great. Look at that. We're right up there next to Poland. And that's not taking into account the children who actually aren't going outside, who are staying inside the doors and who aren't walking around the neighborhoods that they live in. We've got to do something about this. There's a school near where our kids' primary school is. That's a junction on Parnell Square. And it's a racetrack. The cars come around the corner at the Rotunda Hospital. They speed up. The road gets wider. It's like Formula One racing. By the time they get to this junction, they're doing 40 or 50 miles an hour, and it's simply impossible for pedestrians to get across. And what happens with these kind of junctions, these super wide junctions that are catering for vehicles and not for people, is that things can go wrong. And these flowers are a sad reminder of a child who lost their life on this road a few years ago. So we've got to reconsider the way we're designing our cities. And these left-hand filter lanes are a particular pet hate of mine. Road engineers love them. They speed up the cars. But for the pedestrian, it's not a nice place to be. And you see tourists who've come to Dublin, and they're kind of standing in the middle of that junction with the map, and they're looking for the Guinness storehouse. They're bewildered, they're confused, they're afraid. But we shouldn't be doing this just for tourists. We should be doing it for ourselves. We should really improve these kind of junctions. And that's no way to encourage walking, to encourage people to find their way out on foot around the city. So I think we've got to reconsider these kind of filter lanes. And I obsess a little bit about this. I've produced a map showing the left-hand filter lanes of Dublin. Look, they don't all have to go, but I think we should try and reconsider some of them. And as Fred Kent, who runs the Project for Public Spaces in New York, says, if you plan cities for cars and traffic, you get cars and traffic. But if you plan for people and places, you get people and places. And that's why we go to beautiful places on our holidays. They're older places that were designed by the people for the people. They weren't designed in an office somewhere with a set square and a scale rule of how do we get vehicles around this junction. There's another example of that kind of junction. In this case, they actually designed the buildings around the junction. They started with the road and they said, we've got to curve the buildings here because the traffic can't slow down. The more barriers, the more obstacles, the more kind of cattle crush barriers we put into place, actually it gets more dangerous because the cars are going faster. And that's not a great place for people. It's great for cars, but for children, for the vulnerable, for older people, it's not good. And that's during the daytime. It's even worse at night. All new buildings, all new junctions, not a great way to build a city. And I think actually something happened over the last few years. The 20th century, it was all about modernity. No limits, just keep going from here to infinity. It was all about, all that is solid melts into air, this incredible sense of discovery. But I think the 21st century is quite different. We realize that there are limits to what we can do in the world. And I think we've got to think about the stuff that we made, the kind of the product of what we did in the 20th century, and think again about it. Take the existing infrastructure and manage it differently. So instead of having 3 rows of cars parked outside Pearse Street Garda Station, the people who are in charge of the traffic in Dublin City, we've got to think about a slightly different role model and allocate that space slightly differently. This kind of junction outside Liberty Hall, 3 different pedestrian refuges before you get across a road in the centre of Dublin. This should be the public space of Dublin, the quays of Dublin, the going east-west, the north-south axis with O'Connell Street, Grafton Street. These should be the finest public spaces in the city that we take pride in, that tourists enjoy, but instead we get things like this. And even on the kind of crossing points where we do have just one pedestrian crossing to get across, you only get 5 seconds as the pedestrian to get across from one side to the other. 5 seconds out of a 60-second cycle. So it's no wonder when you talk to older people, when you talk to their parents, they say, I don't go into town anymore. I find I can't find my way across the road. Something is going desperately wrong when older people say, I can't navigate these areas. And we've got to think about the balance between traffic and people. It's not about banning cars and trucks in the city, but it's about getting that right balance. Any street, any road gets this balance between the traffic or the mobility aspects of itself, the social aspects, and the economic aspects. We always have to balance this, but I suspect we've gone a little too far in the wrong direction with catering for vehicles and traffic in Dublin City. And one of the great things we can do, one of the secret weapons, is to simply widen footpaths. There's, a standard Dublin footpath where you have to kind of half move your way out into the traffic to simply get past people who are beside you. So the secret weapon is widening footpaths, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Phoenix Park, beautiful park, the greatest park, the biggest park in Europe. There isn't a single pedestrian crossing along 3 miles of what is essentially a racetrack. It is a racetrack. It's used as a racetrack once or twice a year. It's not easy. If you go to the zoo and you want to walk across the road, maybe you've had that experience of looking left, looking right, and that dot on the horizon is whizzing past you. So let's even think about redesigning some of these parks as well. And there's one of my pet hates, the Lewis tracks. You can't have the Lewis and pedestrians in the same place. Put a barrier up. So these kind of areas, take down that sign. Maybe you have a warning saying stay away from the Lewis, but I kind of suspect people know that anyway. Even some of our great spaces, or what should be our great spaces, Christchurch. Christchurch, New Year's Eve, the bells. Over the last few years, it's changed from being, get out there and listen to the bells is, okay, it's 12:05, can you move on? There's cars coming through here. Not a great way to use this space for tourists or for Dubliners. So we need to rethink those kind of areas as well. That's the bad news. There is some good news in all of this. And I think we can look to good examples, both abroad and in Ireland, that will help get us out of this mess. In London, in the last few years, there's been a big move towards lower speed limits, 20 miles an hour, 30 kilometers an hour. It saves lives. It means that if you're hit by a car, you live, you don't die. It's as simple as that. So don't let those who advocate higher speed limits tell you that this isn't a good idea. The other interesting thing they're doing over there is they're narrowing junctions. This was a big wide junction. It's now actually easy to get across. The car driver slows down, looks at you, and lets you go ahead. So some of these kind of technologies can really help us out. And in London as well, they're actually putting back public seating. And you don't have to pay for an overpriced drink to sit down and enjoy the view. So you're walking from A to B, take a break, slow down, enjoy the sunshine. We need a little bit of that in Dublin. Shared spaces as well, where the footpath's at the same level as the car. It sounds counterintuitive, but actually the cars slow down a bit because they're not sure who's in charge. And sometimes taking away a few road signs, planting a few trees, makes the pedestrian feel proud, and that can only be a good thing. In Spain, they've really kind of widened the footpath there so that the cars have to go at a snail's pace through the junction. So there are tools out there that we can draw down and use quite effectively in the Irish context. And here in Freiburg in Germany, a new suburb, and that child is discovering their outdoor freedom. They feel safe. She feels safe walking down that road to or from the shops or to her home or to school. And they have a sign that actually says, look, this is a shared space where a child can kick a ball. We do have some of those signs in Dublin, but we don't have the kids on it. We have the car, the adult, and the house. But for some reason, the powers that be said you can't put kids on the sign, anything. Who knows what might happen. And there is a move towards better design and guidance. We do have in Ireland a design manual for urban roads and streets. The problem is, it's not really been implemented. And I used to think it was ignorance, it was a lack of knowledge or a lack of budgets. And now I'm not so sure. I think there is that residual view that something's wrong if you put the cyclist or the pedestrian at the top of the transport spectrum. I think we've got to take a long, hard look at the people who know their way around the city. Women with trolleys, they, I think, are the best designers of urban streets and places. They're everywhere. They are about the most sustainable transport mode you can imagine. You take your stuff in your trolley. I have a whole library of slides. I won't bore you with them. But I just love that sense of I'm in charge. These women, they're guarding the public spaces. Do you remember that video of Leave It Out a few years ago, which was all about what Jane Jacobs described, defensible spaces with people keeping an eye on things. Let's get her involved in the design of our junctions. And let's get kids involved. Let's get children involved in designing them. That's the walk on Wednesdays from the Green School. But let's listen to what they have to say when they're talking about walking to school. And I love this sign, 5 miles an hour. Just slow right down. And let the child who painted that sign sit right beside the engineer and say, here's how you do it. There's some good examples. There's the Campshires in Dublin, down in Docklands. Docklands wasn't all bad. We actually built some good spaces down there. We took cars off the North and South Quays. We planted trees and made it possible to walk along away from the traffic and enjoy the view. We need to do a lot more of that. We also have a public realm strategy in Dublin. It's a great document. It looks great. It feels great. But nobody's in charge of it. They couldn't come to a decision. Would the planners be in charge? Would the road engineers be in charge? So it kind of sits there. And we have to live with the consequences of these cattle crushes, of junctions that don't work right. So somebody needs to drive this public realm strategy. And we need to come back to that again. And simple things can work well. This is a zebra crossing down in Limerick. Zebra crossings are making a comeback. They're great. You put your foot out on the pedestrian crossing, the car has to stop. We need more of that, putting the pedestrian in charge. And I'm glad to say there's a few pedestrian crossings coming back to Dublin. I remember 20 years ago, you can't do that. But there is a change. There's a sea change in thinking about the measures that do work and that can work. And I think that can only be a good thing. And I think we should think big. There's the Quays Bachelor's Walk on St. Patrick's Day a couple of years ago. How about just once a month saying, let's take the cars off the quays? Think about what it would do for Dublin. It just makes you feel proud of your city again. And it could be done anywhere. I mean, there's a view of the Customs House quay during the Flight Fest last year. Fantastic. You could actually sit down in the fast lane. We need more of that. It's been done abroad. Let's do it. Let's do it here. And let's take these big, wide waste-track junctions like Parnell Square. Just narrow the footpaths, put in a few trees, a bit of sculpture, slow down the cars, and give that space back to the city. And we can do that almost anywhere. We can do it with that mad junction on North King Street. Sure, you're limiting the cars a little bit, but you're giving the freedom back to the pedestrian, and that can only be a good thing, and we need to do more of that. Same thing, just create these kind of spaces where you might actually have a chat to somebody instead of having to shout to make yourself heard over the sound of the traffic. We need to do a lot more of that. So we can even take some of these big junctions that are just all about shoving the traffic through and maybe look at them again and come up with solutions that just get the balance right again. I mean, I'm not saying that's perfect, but I think we could sit down and try and reimagine some of these junctions and do something about it. This isn't right. I mean, that's not good for the kids up there, for the tourists, for the Dubliners. That's not the way we should be treating our city. And I'd like to think that, in a few years' time, we might take that junction out on the Cabra Road, just redesign it slightly to make it just tilt the balance that little bit easier to make you think about allowing the pedestrian to be in charge. And I'd hope that, in 20 or 30 years' time, when our kids have children, that our grandchildren, when they get to their first day in secondary school, that they'll feel confident enough to let go of their parents' hand and find their own way in the world. I know we can do this. I really do, and I think we have to do it for their sake. Thank you.